I had always dreamed of having a perfect family. After my divorce, I remarried and found a love I thought could last forever. I had two daughters, Ella, my biological child, and Sophie, my stepdaughter, who was only a year older than Ella. For a long time, everything seemed so beautiful. The two girls had a bond that filled me with pride. I watched them grow together, supporting each other through the highs and lows of life, and I thought nothing could break the unity we shared. But then everything changed. One afternoon, everything I'd believed in came crashing down. Ella walked into the house, her face pale, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and betrayal. I remember the words she spat out with such venom. "How could you, Sophie? How could you sleep with Brian?" It felt like the world had turned upside down. My heart stopped as I watched my daughters, one my own flesh and blood, the other the child I had raised as my own, tear each other apart. I tried to intervene to calm the storm that was brewing between them, but nothing I said made a difference. Sophie, her face red with shame, finally admitted the truth. She had been having an affair with Brian, Ella's boyfriend. I stood there in shock, my world crumbling around me. How could this have happened? How could Sophie, the girl I had treated like my own daughter, betray us both in such a way? I tried to understand. I told Ella she needed to forgive Sophie, to give her a chance to make it right. But Ella, filled with so much hurt, wouldn't listen. The bond they had shared, the love I had seen between them for so many years, seemed to vanish in an instant. The damage had been done. Ella's tears, her anger, her pain, they were all too much for me to bear. Sophie, too, was crushed by the guilt, but Ella couldn't see past the betrayal. And in that moment, I realized that no matter how much I pleaded, no matter how hard I tried to mend the wound, nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed were filled with silence, arguments, and more pain. Ella refused to speak to me, accusing me of taking Sophie's side. I couldn't bear it. I had tried to be a good mother to both of them. I had tried to hold this family together, but I had failed. When Ella refused to come to Sophie's wedding, I knew we had crossed a line. That day wasn't about celebration. It was about the deep fracture that now ran through our family. I had lost my daughter, my own flesh and blood, the one I had always tried to protect, the one I thought I knew so well. She had distanced herself, running to her father, and no matter how many times I reached out to her, it was always the same. Silence. She wouldn't even answer my calls. And Sophie, the girl I had loved as my own, was left standing there, devastated by her actions, but with no way to undo the damage she had caused. I am a mother who has lost her child, not to distance or time, but to betrayal. To a wound so deep, there is no bandage strong enough to heal it. I've tried, but sometimes love is not enough. As the days turned into weeks after the shocking revelation, I could barely comprehend the chaos that had erupted in our once peaceful home. My heart was heavy, torn between the daughter I had raised and the one I had taken in as my own. But even in the midst of all this pain, something inside me told me that I couldn't accept the full extent of the betrayal. I tried to bury the truth, to deny it, even as it festered like an open wound in the heart of our family. Sophie, the girl I had cherished and cared for, was now the center of my deepest frustration. How could she? How could she have not seen the damage her actions would cause? I tried to tell myself that she was a victim too, that the pressures of our broken family, her desire for validation, had led her astray. But deep down, I knew I was only trying to protect myself. I refused to acknowledge how her betrayal had not only crushed Ella, but also fractured everything I had worked so hard to build. I justified my actions. I refused to confront the harsh truth, even when my own guilt gnawed at me. When Sophie begged me to understand, to forgive her, I told myself it was a sign of her remorse. But in reality, I was terrified. Terrified of losing the family I had always longed for, terrified of facing the consequences of her betrayal. So I told Sophie it was okay. I told her that we could move on. I pretended that things could go back to normal. But they couldn't, and I knew that. Ella, on the other hand, became a painful reminder of what I had failed to protect. Her rage burned like a fire that wouldn't be extinguished. She could see through me. She knew that I was making excuses for Sophie. She saw me turning a blind eye to the truth, and with each passing day, she pulled further away from me. When she left to live with her father, I pretended it was for the best. I told myself it was just a phase, that she needed space. But deep down, I was afraid. I was terrified that I had already lost her forever. My actions, or rather my inaction, were slowly tearing me apart. I couldn't bring myself to admit that I had failed as a mother. I couldn't confront the fact that I had allowed Sophie's betrayal to destroy the bond I had with Ella. I had chosen to deny the truth, to shield myself from the harsh reality of my own failure. But with every passing day, the walls between us grew higher. No amount of denial could undo the damage that had been done. And as the distance between my daughters grew wider, I was left with the bitter realization that my refusal to face the truth had only made everything worse. Months had passed since the betrayal shattered our family, but the pain still lingered like an unhealed wound. Bella, my once bright and loving daughter, had distanced herself from the chaos. After Sophie's actions and my refusal to face the truth, I thought she would be the one to heal the wounds, to bring us back together. But I was wrong. Bella's silence spoke volumes. She had been silent for weeks, retreating into herself like a fragile flower closing its petals to protect against the storm. I didn't know what to say to her. I didn't know if I could ever earn back her trust, if I could ever repair the damage I had done by allowing Sophie's betrayal to go unchecked. She'd always been the one who craved justice, who believed in right and wrong with unflinching certainty. Now she was drowning in her own disappointment. One evening, Bella came to me, her eyes red from crying. The words that followed crushed me to the core. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling, "how could you not see it? How could you let Sophie destroy everything we had? I trusted you, and you chose her over me." Her words echoed in my mind long after she had left. It was a brutal reality that I had been too blind to face. Bella left soon after, going to live with her father, something I never imagined would happen. I tried to tell myself it was for the best, that she needed time and space. But deep down I knew. I'd failed her. I had failed as a mother, and no amount of denial could change the fact that Bella would never look at me the same way again. The distance between us had become an unbridgeable chasm, and I had no one but myself to blame. The tension in our marriage had been building for months, though I had no idea how deep the cracks had grown until it all exploded in my face. I never imagined that the woman I had married, the person I had trusted with my heart and soul, would betray me so completely. When Dee first suggested that we open our marriage, I felt blindsided, yet I tried to be open-minded. She said it was something she needed to explore, a part of herself that had been stifled. At first, it seemed harmless enough. After all, we had been together for years, and the little change couldn't hurt, right? But deep down, I had a sinking feeling that this wouldn't end well. My instincts were screaming at me to hold on to the love we had, but I pushed those feelings aside, telling myself that we can navigate this new chapter together. The person she chose was Kim, someone Dee met through mutual friends. She seemed harmless at first, just another face in the crowd. But the more I saw them together, the more I noticed the way their chemistry sizzled when they interacted. The subtle glances, the coy smiles, things that were so intimate, they made me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. Dee insisted that it was nothing serious, just a harmless fling. But I couldn't shake the nagging feeling in my gut that something was off. And then it all came crashing down. One night, I was going through our shared fun account to check our bills when I stumbled upon a series of messages between Dee and Kim. It was like a slap in the face. The messages were intimate, full of inside jokes, flirtatious remarks, and plans to meet up behind my back. The realization hit me like a freight train. Dee had been lying to me. Despite her promises to be open and honest, she had continued the affair in secret, deceiving me every step of the way. My heart shattered into a million pieces as I read through the text, feeling sick to my stomach. How could she do this to me? How could she betray the trust we had built over the years? I confronted her that night, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. I demanded answers, my emotions boiling over, but Dee remained eerily calm, as if this was just another mundane conversation. She didn't apologize, didn't express any regret. Instead, she tried to justify her actions, telling me that this was something she had needed for herself and that I should understand. But the more she spoke, the more I felt the distance between us growing. The love we once shared seemed to evaporate in the air, replaced by a cold, detached bitterness. It was as if she had already checked out, emotionally and mentally, and I was left clinging to a ghost of what we had been. I couldn't believe what was happening. The woman I had married, the woman I thought I knew, was now a stranger to me. I had always trusted her, and yet she had turned my world upside down without a second thought. The betrayal wasn't just in the affair. It was in the lies, the deceit, the complete disregard for the vows we had made to each other. I felt like a fool for believing her, for thinking that we could make this work, for allowing myself to be manipulated by her false promises. After the confrontation, I knew that there was no going back. The trust was gone, shattered beyond repair. Despite her attempts to downplay the severity of what had happened, I knew that this was the end. I filed for divorce, unable to continue living a lie. The pain of the betrayal was like a constant weight on my chest, but I couldn't stay in a marriage where I was being deceived and disrespected. I had to walk away, even though every part of me ached at the thought of ending it. As the days passed, I watched as Dee seemed to go on with her life, unaffected by the turmoil she had caused. It was as if she was unbothered by the damage she had inflicted. Meanwhile, I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered heart and try to rebuild a life that had been ripped apart. It was as though she had already moved on, and I was just an afterthought in her mind. The emotional toll of everything, the lies, the betrayal, the sense of abandonment, was suffocating. I had lost the person I loved, the person I had trusted more than anyone else in the world. But the hardest part was yet to come. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, I had to face the painful reality that Dee didn't seem to care at all. She showed no remorse, no regret, no understanding of the hurt she had caused. Every conversation we had was filled with cold indifference, as if I was just another obstacle to her happiness. She never once apologized for what she had done, for breaking my heart and tearing our lives apart. The silence was deafening, and it became clear to me that I was nothing more than a casualty in her quest for something else. It was in that silence that I realized the truth. Dee had moved on long before I had even caught on to what was happening. She was already emotionally detached, already invested in Kim, and I was just a blip on her radar. The realization was brutal, and the pain of it was almost too much to bear. I had been a fool to think that we could work things out, that we could ever go back to the way things were. Now, as I sit here reflecting on everything that's happened, I am left with nothing but the wreckage of a life I once thought I understood. My heart aches, but I know that I can never go back to the way things were. The betrayal was too great, the damage too deep. The woman I loved is gone, and in her place is someone unrecognizable, a stranger who no longer cares about me or the life we once shared. The divorce is final, and I'm left to pick up the pieces, to start over in a world that no longer makes sense.